that day. It was a warm spring day. Sun beaten down in sometimes a very harsh climate. Dust being kicked up by those coming and going, by the horses, the donkeys, the carts. But there was some kind of electricity that could be almost felt, excitement. Something was about to happen. Something that they had been wanting and expecting for a very, very long time. And then you could hear it. You could hear the crowds building and coming together. Children, men and women rushing ahead of the main crowd, gathering palm leaves and placing their cloaks and these leaves on the ground so that dust wouldn't be kicked up as much. Because there was someone important, someone amazing coming. The crowd got louder and louder with expectation and excitement. Here he came. The man they've been waiting for decades, if not centuries. The Messiah is finally here. You can hear that in the voices of the people, that excitement. And for those who did not know, they quickly heard about it. They heard about this prophet, this man that was expected to be the Messiah, that was going to change the world as they knew it. It was an exciting day. Yet there was much more going on in that moment than most of us were aware of. For most of the Jews there in Jerusalem, they saw that their kingdom, their land, their temple was subjugated to an evil empire, that being the Romans. They saw these leaders, the foreign power is oppressive and disregarding God's commandments and oaths that He's made to the people of Israel, that they were the chosen people. But there was that sense of excitement because here's someone who was coming in and challenging those who were part of the Roman Empire and those who aligned themselves with the Roman Empire. Because many of the leaderships, especially the Sadducees in particular, and the high priests, and the king of Jerusalem, had pledged loyalty to that empire, to the Romans, the very people that were seen as oppressors. But they had excitement because this man Jesus that they had been hearing about stood up to them and pointed out the contradictions and their hypocrisies. This was excitement. They were ready for this new king, this new leader. And that's what they were so excited about that day. Waving those palm leaves, putting down their cloaks. There was excitement in the air because the end of their oppression was coming. But something different happened. See, in the minds of the people, they were expecting someone like someone in their own history. A man named John Maccabee, who just a few centuries before had led a revolution against the Greek rulers. See, after Alexander the Great had died, his generals split the empire into pieces, and each of the four generals ruled different parts. And Jerusalem was part of this. Israel was a part of this. And they saw that as oppression, especially when one of the leaders of this dynasty sacrificed a pig on the altar of the Holy of Holies. The insult could not be taken any longer. The people revolted and were led by a man named John Maccabee. And as the legend goes, the day that they had overthrown the rulers, that Ptolemaic dynasty, John Maccabee rode on a giant war horse, a white horse that was seen as an image of a conqueror, of a king, of a ruler, something pure and great. And that was what was in the mind of these people who were waiting for Jesus to enter the city of Jerusalem. And instead, they got something very, very different. Not sure how many people picked up on it, but it was there in their faces. While they were expecting a king, a warrior, someone of great power, instead they got a man riding a donkey. A man trying to enter humbly, saying through this very image, I'm not what you expect. I'm not a John Maccabee. I will give you freedom in a completely different way. But what's this story? What does this all mean to us today? Something that happened almost 2,000 years ago. What does it matter? Well, first, I want to play with that image that Jesus did with those people. The image of riding on a donkey. Something they had not expected. See, too often in our culture, we like to say this is what God is like. We start creating this box that each of us kind of creates on our own, and as a culture, we create what we believe God should be like. Whether it be what God looks like, what God would approve of as songs in a church, what kind of politics God would back up, and how God can act in this world. We start building these boxes and we try to place God in them. But instead of placing God in them, we place our minds and our spirits in there, limiting our perception and experience of God. Destroy those expectations. Let them be opened. Let them not be contained in a box, because God will do what God will do. That's pretty much what the name Yahweh can be translated in Hebrew. I am who I am. I will do what I will do. And that's exactly what happened. While the people were expecting this leader, this military power that would come, they got a Messiah who taught peace and grace and humility. That brings me to the next part, humility. This was a trait that was associated with slaves. The overall culture that they were surrounded by was that you were to kind of build yourself up, and this was especially true in the Roman culture, that you were to come forward and tell people of your great deeds. Think of someone coming in front of Caesar, a general or someone like that. When they're introduced to Caesar, they would not just be introduced as Bob. That'd be Bob who won the fight at so-and-so, who conquered the barbarians here and helped fight back the enemies here. That's how they'd be introduced, not just, this is Bob. Bob, Caesar, Caesar, Bob. It was a big show of who they were. And for Jesus to enter in humbleness, that was not something they expected. But it was a lesson in and of itself about what Jesus was about, who he was, and what we should be as well. Too often in our culture, we try to look like we're strong, that there's nothing wrong in our lives, when we can be tearing and breaking apart on the inside. When we try to keep up this false ego and try to build ourselves up, we miss on connecting with each other and getting the help that we so desperately need. If you're hurting, if you're struggling, it's okay to ask for that help. It's one of the reasons Jesus created that group of men and women that surrounded him and traveled him, so they could support each other. That's why the church, when we see in Acts, while the rich of the group would sell their property to help those who were in need, because of humbleness, they not only connected to each other better, but to God as well. Because pride is sometimes part of that box that we create that limits God. But when we are humble, when we admit that we are finite and cannot do everything, that we're not perfect, you experience God so much more intimately. Connect with others so much better. Also, when we look at this story, Jesus knew this was going to probably be his last week on earth. He knew he had challenged and upset the authorities of his own people and the Romans. And when you challenge those kinds of people, you're often killed for it. People don't like having their power and strength challenged, and Jesus knew this. Yet he came in to the city triumphantly, even though as humble as it was a moment of triumph. He could see these people in celebration and the excitement that they were feeling, that of who he was and who he would be, knowing what was ahead of him. The mocking, the beatings, the death on the cross. Jesus still came in with dignity and strength. And we too can draw from that image that you see and the paintings on your screens and so forth. This image of Jesus coming in boldly with an inner strength that could only come from God. We often face challenges that sometimes feel that overwhelming or even destroy our very essence and our being and our lives, sometimes even our family and friends. Yet we can march forward through those times strengthened by Jesus Christ, just as he went forward into the city that he knew his death would be coming in. Even if doom faces us, even if hard times face us, know that we are not alone, and God knows exactly what we've been through. One of the great things about Jesus Christ is that he was so human. He loved, he was angered, he was frustrated, he felt joy, embarrassment at times. So God knows what we're going through. God has experienced it and experiences it with us today. So stand boldly, stand triumphantly in these times, knowing that God is there with you. God will never abandon you. Only you can abandon God. So take this Palm Sunday, look at these lessons and these images of Jesus Christ. And then as we go through this week, through the celebration of the Lord's Supper on Thursday, Maundy, Thursday, and through the remembrance of Jesus' death on Good Friday, know that Jesus would not be defeated, because there is Easter. There is that Sunday, that empty tomb. So when we come at this table here today, think of Jesus, who knew that this death was coming, yet faced it with dignity, strength, but yet humility at the same time, showing people that God works in very unexpected and sometimes mysterious ways. Amen.